Welcome back to the Grow RDH podcast. My name is Katie, and we are here for another episode. If you're new here, I just want to introduce myself. My name is Katie, and I am a dental hygienist based out of South Dakota. I do a couple different things. I work clinically in a corrections facility, and I teach at a local school. I teach a few various things like dental anatomy, perio, and ethics, and I love it. And if you are revisiting the podcast, I appreciate the support. Thank you for coming back and listening. And if you are loving the content, please like and subscribe wherever you're listening. I do post these on YouTube and Spotify. And just to kind of give you a primer for this episode, if you like to listen on YouTube, or if you've never listened to on YouTube, I would again highly suggest that you might consider this one on YouTube, just because the pictures I'm going to share will be shared on the screen. And so you'll be able to see some clinical examples. And before I get too far ahead of myself, this week's episode number 13, is on width of attached gingiva. If you are a return listener, you may have heard my podcast episode. I think it was number 11. It was 2 episodes ago, and it was on clinical attachment loss. And we talked about how that gingival margin value is really the missing link in making some of our perio charts more accurate. So if you want to go back and listen to that one, that would be helpful, but you don't have to listen to that before you listen to this one. They're standalone episodes, but I do have some clinical examples I'm going to share. And so, so feel free to hop on over to YouTube if you're not already. And we're just going to go ahead and kind of get started here. I'm not going to share my screen quite yet. First, I just want to talk a little bit about width of attached gingiva. The calculation abbreviation for this is WAG. So WAG, width of attached gingiva. And no, we are not referencing wives and girlfriends of celebrities and athletes. I wish dentistry was that exciting and I had some, fun celeb gossip that we could chat about. I don't know if you listen to other podcasts, but love me a good Vanderpump Rules podcast. But this is not that. Width of attached gingiva, or WAG, is going to be our topic today. And we're going to talk a little bit about what it is and why it's important, and how it really helps us quantify recession. And so I want to first say that I think when we do our perio charts, everyone focuses on and everyone recognizes recession, right? It's easy to measure. And our patients, that's something that our patients really notice, right? They can see when the gingiva is receding, they can see that the root exposure is there. And it's something that most patients are very aware of. And it is probably one of the most talked about gingival defects, probably the most documented or charted gingival defects, and rightfully so, right? It does have a very damaging impact on the periodontium health going forward. It can cause a lot of risk for future periodontal destruction, potential tooth loss if they're a perio patient. And so gingival recession is very important. And so I definitely don't want to diminish that. But I think that a little used measurement and calculation can be employed to help better chart and understand recession. And that calculation is width of attached gingiva. Most of you probably remember this from school because it is something that we teach in school, but I don't know how often it's employed unless you are specifically referring. But even calculating these for maybe at-risk teeth or patients that do have a lot of recession, I think maybe having this become a little bit more of the norm might be helpful, right? And what we do know is that attached gingiva is really, really strong, right? It is keratinized. It provides support and structure to the periodontium that patients really, really need in order to maintain periodontal health. It helps prevent further loss. Based on the 2017 reports, approximately 2 millimeters of keratinized tissue and 1 millimeter of attached gingiva is necessary to maintain gingival health. And so we're going to talk about insufficient width and what that means. But I did just sort of want to review it and talk about why it's important. I was going to include some of the values, and even in school, this is something that varies a little bit. And so we always teach out of the reference texts that are used for the board's exam. And so, I teach dental anatomy and I teach perio, and both of the reference texts say a little bit different things on how much attached gingiva each area, each tooth is supposed to have. And that's to be expected, right? Attached gingiva levels are only averages. Same thing like with eruption dates or eruption patterns. The age a child is supposed to get a tooth, right? That is just an average. They're taking an average of all these different patients and clumping them all together, and you get an average. And that's the same with attached gingiva. So what I think is more important is focusing on that specific periodontiums, because if you take these measurements and make these calculations, even at the very first visit, you have a starting point or a baseline, and then you would have that baseline throughout the lifetime of the time that they're at your office. And so having that level for them where they've started and how it's progressing is way more accurate and going to be way more helpful to you as a practitioner in terms of determining how likely that patient is to lose attachment or attached gingiva in the future. And so yeah, I just want to just sort of review why it's important and how we measure it. And so just like our Cal episode, again, if you watched that, thank you. And if you haven't watched it, I highly suggest. But just like that episode, I'm going to give you a few examples with drawings. And because I'm a visual learner, and just like we talked in the Cal episode, if you're looking at the picture, it's going to make sense. And this is just going to seem super, super easy. And when you're looking at it and you're like putting it together in your head, yes, it makes sense. But first, okay, so the first thing you do, you're going to have two measurements, just like how WAG has two different measurements. So the first measurement that you take is from the mucogingival junction, so that bottom line at the very bottom of the attached gingiva, the mucogingival junction, where the alveolar mucosa meets the attached gingiva. And so you measure from that line all the way up to the top of the gingival margin, so where the gingiva ends. And that gives you the measurement of the total gingiva, or TG, that we're going to see on the slides. So total gingiva, mucogingival junction, all the way up to the top of the gingival margin. The second measurement is very simple. It's your pocket depth, which you already do. So you already have half of this equation, and you already have that piece of it. And so the equation then is total gingiva minus your pocket depth. And that is going to give you the width of attached gingiva. When the width of attached gingiva is 0, that is a specific gingival defect that we call insufficient width. Insufficient width is more objective when you consider recession, right? With recession, we're just basically determining the cal. And so we can see, yes, you've had this much loss, but WAG is like putting that on its side, or looking at it from the opposite way. How much attached gingiva do you have left? How much structure do you have left? And again, if you have a good baseline and you're following this patient throughout, knowing how much good structure is left can be really important when determining when to refer. And so again, I think insufficient width for our really high-risk patients is more objective. I think it gives us a really good idea of what is left. And the presence of attached gingiva remaining is really important to note. So we would want to, if that patient did have insufficient width or 0 attached gingiva left, we definitely want to be referring those patients out to a periodontist. So yeah, just a little bit of background there. And so I am going to share my screen. So sorry for the bouncy video here. I'm going to share my screen and we'll pull up these clinical examples. So you should be seeing our first example here. We have our WAG calculation. So I just have the calculation written out at the top so it's easy to see. Total gingiva minus pocket depth. And I know on these pictures it does look funny. These are pictures that I use in class too. And right away when you look at it, you're like, wait, is that the root? No, it's not the root. It is the pocket depth. And so if you're looking at it like you're looking at the person like face to face, that would be, that's why it's a lighter pink color, because that would be where the pocket depth lands. And so what you'll see on this example, you have total gingiva from the mucogingival junction up to the gingival margin. That's 3 millimeters of total gingiva, and then you have a 1 millimeter pocket depth on that facial. And so you would take 3 minus 1, and you would have 2 millimeters of width of attached gingiva here on this example. Let's go to the next one. Number 2. Again, this is not the root. That's not the pink line is not the root. It's not like some weird misshapen tooth. So for this example, we have a total gingiva from the mucogingival junction up to the gingival margin of 2 millimeters. And then we have a pocket depth of 1 millimeter. So 2 minus 1 is 1 millimeter of WAG. And what we know is that that is within the 2017 guidelines, having 1 millimeter of attached gingiva left. So that wouldn't necessarily be insufficient width yet, but this would be a tooth that you're like, okay, you're right on the border. We need to monitor this and make sure this isn't getting any worse. Same thing with this example. So this example shows a molar, and this molar has 4 millimeters of total gingiva from mucogingival junction to the gingival margin, and then a 3 millimeter pocket depth. And so we subtract 4 millimeters minus 3 millimeters, and yet we still have 1 millimeter of WAG, which is within the guidelines, but also on the verge of maybe needing some further care. And then here's our last example. And again, I love visual learning. And so this to me really makes sense. You can see, with that light pink line, you have a true gingival defect here. So this is insufficient width. This is when the pocket depth of 2 millimeters goes all the way down, or up in this case, all the way up to the mucogingival junction. And so your total gingiva is 2, your pocket depth is 2, and you have 0 millimeters of width of attached gingiva left. And so again, we call that insufficient width. That means this patient has 0 attached gingiva left. That whole entire pocket, that whole entire support on that facial is only free gingiva. There's nothing attached. It goes free gingiva all the way directly to the oral mucosa. And that's a bad thing. That means that there's not enough attached gingiva there to really support the tooth. And so that would be an example of something that we would want to refer out to a periodontist and really make sure that we follow up on. This tooth would obviously be more at risk for further loss, and not just periodontal loss or periodontal damage, but also periodontal disease in general. And so that is width of attached gingiva. Pretty simple. This is a short one tonight, but also just, I think, a good reminder, right? When we get out of school, we get in the grind. We talked about that in the Cal episode, and when we're in that grind, sometimes we do the basics and we sort of forget that there are some of these more nuances, or there's more than one way to describe recession. And so many of us do really do well at educating patients about recession. And we do that well, again, because it's easy to see. It's easy to see for the patient and they understand it. And so I love that. I think that we still need to do recession. This is not a replacement for recession, but this does give us a measurement that I think we can utilize quite a bit if we think about how often we run into this. And so do me a favor, just in the next week or two, as this is fresh in your mind, let me know. Do you have patients that have insufficient width that maybe kind of slid under the radar because we're focused on the recession part of it? And yeah, I would love to hear your experiences with Width of Attached Gingiva, experiences with referring, and some positive success stories when helping patients get to a periodontist and maybe get some grafting done. So hope you are having a great week, and hope you have a great weekend. It's going to be Memorial Day weekend here coming up soon, and I don't have too big of plans. It is supposed to storm here, so I'm hoping I get to go out golfing, but I don't know. It's been really, really stormy. It kind of subsided today. It was really sunny and warm, and I got about half my garden planted, and then the kids were just tired, and they're like, we can't do this anymore. And so, plus it was getting dark, but yeah, I got half my garden planted. So I wanted to get some of it in before the storm hit. So that is what I'll be doing. Hopefully finishing planting my garden and maybe going out golfing. We'll see. Thank you for listening. If you've made it thus far, I really appreciate your support. And so I just want to always say thank you for listening, and thank you for being a return listener. And if you would please like and subscribe, it does help me sort of get a gauge on what things you like. And if you're looking for a specific episode, or if this episode has brought up some questions that you maybe didn't think about before, or you just have any questions in general or stories, please reach out to me at katie@growrdh.org. Almost forgot that first. katie@growrdh.org. That is my email. You can reach out to me anytime, and I would be happy to read your story, or I would be happy to answer your question over the podcast. Have a great weekend, and I will see you next time.